Accra is the capital city of Ghana, and it is not a very well known fact that Accra has existed for hundreds of years. From its humble origins as a cluster of coastal fishing villages to its current status as one of West Africa's leading urban centers,
We're going to Tesano.
Accra's journey over the past, let's say, 100 years has been nothing short of remarkable. Long before it was designated as the capital city of the country in 1877 by the then British colonial administration, Accra was already a strategic outpost on the Gulf of Guinea. So the city's early growth, well, it was a town back then, but its early growth was catalyzed by trade, first in gold and ivory, and then later on also in the darker shadow of the transatlantic slave trade. And that was when the Europeans built forts such as the Jamestown, the Asher Fort, and the Christiansborg castles, built by the British, the Dutch, and the Danish. And these were, erected along the coast of Accra to form the architectural and historical spine of what would become a major urban center. So these forts is said to have been both points of contention and cooperation among the European powers and the local Ga people. So the indigenous inhabitants of Accra are known as the Ga people, Ga, Ga people, and they are known to have played a very central role in shaping the city's identity, even as other ethnic groups like the Akan, um, which is the major ethnic group in Ghana. So about 50% of the population of Ghana are Akans, and other ethnic groups as well would come to also influence the cultural melting pot of what Accra has become today. So we're right now driving through a very well-known neighborhood in Accra known as Tesano. And Tesano is a Ga word that means on flat rock, on flat rock. So that must, I assume that probably was a name given to the place by the very early settlers of the area because of the landscape of the area. Okay. Um, Now, when Accra replaced Cape Coast, because the former capital of this country was Cape Coast, that is about 140 kilometers west of Accra. Okay. Now, when Accra replaced Cape Coast as the capital of what was known then as the British Gold Coast, and that was the former name for Ghana. Now, the city underwent a significant transformation. Roads, railways, and government buildings were constructed, laying the groundwork for what would become the administrative and economic nucleus of the country. So, by the mid 20th century, Accra had grown into a cosmopolitan town teeming with intellectual and political activity. Now, this was very evident during the independence movement when figures like Kwame Nkrumah used Accra as the stage to rally a nation and to gain independence for the country in 1957. And that was when Accra found itself for the first time in the global spotlight, and not just as the capital of a newly independent state, but as the symbolic heart of Pan Africanism. Now, Accra's population has exploded over the last century because from a modest population of around 20,000 people in the early 1900s, it now has over 5 million inhabitants in the greater Accra area. Okay, and this growth has brought both dynamism and some challenges as well. Migration from rural areas, especially the north of Ghana, has diversified the city's demographics and turned it
That's for Tesano,
into
right?
a multi-ethnic metropolis.
Oh, okay.
So, alongside the Ga people, you find large communities of Ashantis and Agombas and a whole lot of other ethnic groups, you know, and a significant number of expatriates and diasporans as well, particularly from the Caribbean and North America, all living in Accra. So this cultural mosaic gives Accra its rich texture, and that's evident in its languages, its food, its music, fashion, and even its
Bueno,
religious expressions.
bueno.
Yet,
More mama. Ayun.
such
Nagama.
rapid urbanization hasn't been without consequence because Accra grapples with some infrastructural strain, housing shortages, traffic congestion, and waste management challenges. You also have informal settlements like Nima and Old Fadama that also reflect the city's deep inequalities. So while new upscale enclaves like Airport Hills and East Legon symbolize the growing wealth gap of the country, you know, places like Nima and Ofodama and some other areas also bear testament to the challenges that the city um, faces. So it is safe to say that modern Accra is a city of striking contrasts. For example, the very old architecture of Jamestown stands in stark opposition to the towers of Ridge and the Accra Financial Center. You know, the traditional open air markets like Makola coexist with gleaming malls such as the Accra Mall and West Hills Mall, and so on. But culturally, Accra continues to pulse with creativity, you know, because it's the beating heart of Ghana, to be honest. It is also the heart of Ghana's music scene, from high life and hip life to Afro beats. The annual Charlie Water Street Art Festival, also hosted in Jamestown, has become a Pan-African celebration of alternative art, drawing creatives from across the continent and beyond the continent. Now, with regard to technology, Accra is positioning itself as a hub for innovation. With the rise of startups, tech hubs, and increasing foreign investment, it is increasingly seen as one of Africa's emerging digital capitals. Yet, at its core, the city remains rooted in communal values, in spirituality and the warmth of its people. So, looking ahead at the next 100 years, I would say that as Accra stands in the threshold of another century, its challenges are as significant as its potential. With
Gusto niya
climate
sa post
change,
technology.
sea level rise,
Ano yung
and
result?
flooding posing some existential threats, especially to its
Nice.
low-lying coastal zones. So urban planning, sustainability, and inclusive growth will be crucial in ensuring that Accra does not buckle under the weight of its own success. But if history is any indication, Accra is no stranger to reinvention. It has survived colonial conquest, political upheaval, and the growing pains of modernization. So, with strategic planning, civic engagement, and the celebration of its cultural wealth, Accra, I would say, is well positioned to not just endure, but to lead. In the story of Accra, we find a microcosm of Africa's urban future. A city of layered histories, dynamic identities, and bold ambitions.
You're not easy.
So 100 years on, Accra is no longer just the capital city of Ghana, but it is a capital of African possibility. That's what I would say. Now, thank you for being here, and let's catch up again in my next video.